FSN Radio. It's all about what's next. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and sign up for your free weekly newsletter. You'll also get 3 free reports. The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.
Well, we need some moral perspective of exactly what is going on in the Ukraine, how it affects you, how it affects your country, and what is going to be the aftermath of it, which is why we've got the author of book you're definitely familiar with, Uncommon Sense, by Rabbi DB Ganz. You've heard him on here before. Welcome back, Rabbi.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Lutz. It's a pleasure to be on your show again.
So, in the Ukraine, things are not so clear-cut. It's not a case of good versus evil. It's a case of evil against evil, isn't it?
That's what I've been led to believe by the few people I know from the Ukraine. They say that they tell me that the place is so riddled with corruption that it's kind of a case of which crook rises to the top. Yeah. But if you don't play dirty, you aren't any place close to the top.
It's a bad place, and basically you saw the pictures of the deposed leader's compound, and it wasn't quite as gaudy and grotesque as Ceausescu say, but in its own right, it reeked of decadence, didn't it?
Yeah, it reeked of decadence, and just the very fact that it was reputed to be worth something like, what was it, $75 million?
Yeah, I don't know where they got that price tag, but it was certainly far beyond the means of the average, ordinary Ukrainian, and it was just excessive, and, I mean, let's face it, the White House nowadays is pretty decadent, and from what I've heard, they've got a $500,000 a week music budget where they bring in these rappers and contemporary music artists, Beyonce, whomever, to perform weekly concerts in the White House. But nonetheless, it's not quite like we're talking about the Ukrainian emperor's digs, is it?
No. And then also, I believe that the home that this guy was living in was his own private property. The White House is not the property of the president. He lives there. The operating budget is a different matter, and of course, it's outrageous if they're spending anything close to that in entertainment. I certainly agree with that.
Yeah, I mean, we're in a decadent period. These vacations that the first family goes on, and they're using, let's face it, they're using Air Force One as their own personal sky taxi at I think it's $30,000 an hour at least. Maybe it's $200,000 an hour for operating costs of Air Force One. It's kind of outrageous, the Imperial Presidency, but we haven't quite gotten to the point of the Ukraine or some of these other banana dictatorships yet.
Yeah, well, we have something to be happy about.
Or to aspire to.
Oh, please. It's not, one good thing about the United States is there's an election. And so far, our president is due to end his term pretty soon, and maybe they'll elect somebody else that we approve of a little more.
Well, one thing I've learned in all the elections that I've witnessed, and I've stopped voting in them, by the way, as a libertarian, it's just pointless. But one thing I've come to realize, Rabbi, is we can always do worse, and leave it to the will of the masses. We usually do.
Well, there's something, somehow, some way, that there is, something I once discovered in my studies, in my classical studies, that there's a very strong force of inertia in the the national character of a country that continues to power itself and move forward, and it's not. It can last for hundreds of years. So, in a good way, the United States was founded on basically just principles, and they set into motion a country of, I think, very nice people. That I'm talking about the national character. Nice people that believe in doing nice things. And there is a lot of good stuff that goes on here. Sometimes you think that the politicians are sabotaging it, but experience seems to show that even when you have presidents that really drag the country through the mud a little bit, somehow the national personality emerges in a way that's very gratifying and encouraging. And I think that the converse of that is what you see in Ukraine and Russia, where for centuries and centuries they were led by despotic people, and being a despot is how you got ahead. And one dictator is killing the next dictator, and there's no belief in law and order, no respect for private property, no protection of minority groups. And that keeps emerging and reemerging, and that's what you have in Ukraine, where you have a president that was living in this massive mansion. One report I saw that estimated that his average salary over the years was $25,000, and they said that this report, it was on Fox News, I think. They said that his mansion was worth $75 million. You said, well, I don't know how they got that number. So let's say it's $25 million, but you don't buy a $25 million house on $25,000 of salary. So blatant, open corruption. He was living that way in front of everybody. That's the way the country works.
Well, I think he got his mortgage at Quicken Loans, and he probably had a high credit score to do that, Rabbi. Let's face it, right? But look, what you said here, it's a question of morality. And Eastern Europe, they were the buffer zone for the mongrel hordes that swarmed into Europe, and it's always been a very violent kind of dog eat dog kind of existence here, and peasants just wanting to grow their crops and waiting for the next invasion. Let's face it, I hate to use stereotypes. And then punctuated by world wars where they took a lot of the brunt of the action. And, then you go to the Soviet bloc after post-World War II, where they just were like milk cows for the Soviet Empire. So in a way, who can blame them for what they've turned into here?
Yeah. I mean, it's certainly understandable, but I think it goes back much further than World War II. Like that kind of character that you see on display there, I think has been around for a long time. And I know my father and my mother grew up in Eastern Europe, or were born there, and they described some of the stuff that went on, and it really wasn't very nice. I mean, they lived in relative peace. They were fortunate to emigrate to the United States before World War II.
Waiting for the next pogrom, right?
Yeah.
Fiddler on the Roof, right?
Waiting for the next pogrom, but there was a Jew that I knew from Poland. I hope you can relate to this. He was an old man. He's no longer living. But he said in Poland, it was very easy to grow up as a God-fearing person. This guy said, because you're afraid of everybody else. He said, you go to school, the teacher could beat the heck out of you. The same thing as at home. And he said, if you saw a cop and he looked at you the wrong way, you could get an even worse beating. So he said, the idea of fear was not a stranger to us. We grew up with fear all the time. So, that was the world. That is the world there. We take it for granted that we have all these freedoms. We complain that they're too excessive. But there's a very opposite kind of a thing going on in these places.
Yeah, so getting back to the Ukraine, the people that have won, our newfound allies of the West, are some real brutal ultra-nationalist neo-Nazis, a lot of them, and some real nasty characters, aren't they?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. You know, I one of my students is a brilliant young girl from Ukraine who was a student at Harvard, and she studied a little bit of Judaism with me. Her father is there, and she said she's very afraid that these new rulers are going to start riots of this sort and that sort. It'll become a pretext to pounce upon minorities, you know, endanger their lives, take their money. She said they're in, as far as the minorities in Ukraine, they might even have been better off under being affiliated with Russia than under these new guys, because these are thugs that really don't have to answer to anybody. The advantage to the United States and the West with the new leaders of Ukraine is that they hate Russia.
Yeah, the enemy of my enemy is my friend, right?
Right. Exactly.
You gotta choose your enemies carefully, don't you?
Yep. He's my enemy, but because he's Russia's enemy, so he's less of an enemy than Russia or Russia and Ukraine. It's something like that. And really not a happy situation anyway.
But the enemy of your enemy could still be your enemy, as we found out in the Middle East, right?
Yeah, my goodness. You know, that's the same kind of thing where you have these people that have lived for centuries and centuries and centuries under brutality and repression. So, you know, there's an uprising. So the naive American press portrays it as if there's a revolution against tyranny, and let's help the freedom fighters and send them aid and send them all kinds of assistance and embrace them. And then in country after country, what has turned out is that, you know, the new leaders are just as bad as the old leaders, and then therefore, you know, it almost doesn't pay to get involved with them. And sadly, we can't remake the world. We can live honorably ourselves, but not that much you can do when these things happen.
Maybe that's the best advice, is to live honorably yourself, be an example for everyone else. But we're so far past that, aren't we, Rabbi, that we're just no longer in that realm. But we want to talk more about that up next on the FinancialSurvivalNetwork.com. I'm Kerry Lutz.
Warning, you might live in a no-constitution zone. It's the shocking story you won't see on TV. Depending upon where you live in the United States, you may no longer have constitutional rights. Politicians are quietly squeezing the middle class to micromanage you and extract your wealth. Want to see how? Watch the free video at noconstitutionzone.com. Soon, you'll have the last laugh by using these cultural contraband tricks and profit like a king. That's noconstitutionzone.com.
We're back with Rabbi DB Ganz, and Rabbi, we're talking about the Ukraine, and you know, you've got like a lot of stories about the brutality of the place, what's going on there, from your own personal experiences and interacting with your students who attend prestigious schools in Boston, and you know, things as usual aren't what they appear to be. So when Russia jumps in to basically defend their warm water ports, should anybody really be surprised about this? I mean, those ports were obtained by Catherine the Great 300 years ago at great cost to Russia. I mean, why is anyone surprised that Russia is asserting their jurisdiction over that port, or over those two ports, Sevastopol and the other one eludes me right now, when, you know, this is a history here? There's no way they were going to let those ports go to the West. It just was never going to happen.
Yeah, well, I mean, I certainly see it your way. I don't see why anybody would be surprised if I don't know what I can contribute. I would imagine that part of the reason people are surprised is because it seems that a prevailing attitude in the present administration is that somehow if you talk nicely to hard and brutal people, niceness will somehow emerge, and they'll somehow act the way you think they ought to act, and they're pursuing these kinds of policies with every dangerous and troublesome situation out there on the international scene. They're talking nice to Iran. Here's a country that has its hands bloodied with, every darn massacre they could be a part of. They're trying to get nuclear weapons. The one that's trying to kill you and says he wants to kill you is trying to arm himself in a way that he could really do terrible, God forbid, stuff to all of us. So what the president does is talks to them and hopes that the spirit of dialogue will somehow open their hearts.
And gives them money.
These guys are laughing at him. My gosh, they're out to kill, and he's talking like a child, talking childish stuff to them.
You know what that's like? You know what that's like? It's like the mugger comes up to you on the street with a gun to your head and demanding all your, your money or your life, and you're going to reason with him and, say, I understand you had a tough childhood and your parents were mean to you, and you just didn't get you didn't have good opportunities in life.
Right. And
society's unfair.
Right, and then you expect it because you say that he's going to just walk away meekly and give up on the idea of robbing you or killing you.
Right.
Yeah, so he's doing it in Iran. He's doing it with that guy in North Korea.
Yeah.
He's doing it with Putin. He's doing it. What did he say? He's on the wrong side of international law.
Yeah.
He doesn't care about international law. He's a killer. He's a KGB thug.
Yeah.
Talking to killers doesn't do it. You've got to resist them with force. Force, they understand.
Yeah.
Well, I think in that, when you set up this kind of environment, the liberal press seems to fawn over all of this stuff, and then they can't figure out how come Putin wants to take these 2 ports. We're talking nice to him, so we think he's going to be a nice fellow and just forget about his 2 ports. Doesn't work that way,
Yeah.
It's unbelievably naive.
And that kind of goes with your latest blog article, Rabbi, about talking about Neville Chamberlain and Winston Churchill, who in the 30s said, we got to go attack these guys now before they get strong. Let's neutralize the threat. Now, I'm not necessarily saying that's what you do with Putin, but there's probably a better way of dealing with the guy than revoking passports or visas for Russian citizens. I mean, let's face it, that's a totally toothless remedy we're talking about. And the United States isn't leading anyone. Now, you could argue whether it should be or not, but the fact is, either you're going to be a leader or you do nothing. But don't pretend to be a leader and then do nothing. I agree wholeheartedly.
I agree with you, Mr. Lutz. I agree wholeheartedly. And somehow a vacuum of leadership is not a good thing. And there is nobody that seems to be organizing any kind of response. They're just frittering away the moment, doing nothing, and that with every day that passes, they become more entrenched. And in Judaism, we have this, in Jewish wisdom, Jewish teachings, we have this phrase: "He who has 100 wants 200. He who has 200 wants 400." And people don't die with half of what they want, because they always want that much more. And it's axiomatic that if this guy got away with taking this, then the next thing he's going to want is twice as much territory. Maybe he'll start with Estonia and Latvia and Lithuania, where there are Russian minorities, and then he's going to take this and he's going to take that until there'll be a showdown. But by then it's going to be a much bigger, more problematic, event to deal with. Just very much like World War II. Could have been stopped early on with minimal casualties, but it would have required an organized response with force, with resolve, with leadership.
Yeah,
so instead, they let it happen. Nothing, there was no leadership. They let it happen. Hitler armed himself and armed himself and armed himself, and then on his terms, when he was ready, he attacked Poland. The war ended up with 50 million casualties, unfortunately.
Yeah, well,
it's terrible. It's heartbreaking to see this happening.
Mm-hmm. I'm not sure that this is the way it's going to end up, but certainly you're creating further problems and turmoil and chaos down the road when you fail to address problems currently. They don't go away, just like with your kids. When you fail to address problems with your children now, they don't go away now. They just get worse later on, and that's what's going to happen in the Ukraine, in the Middle East, in Asia, you name it. And that's what lack of leadership all comes down to, really.
Right. You say Asia, I think that China is one of the most serious and dangerous, if not the most dangerous threat to the United States at this point. It was the news that they hacked virtually every American company. They hacked the Defense Department. Mm-hmm. They hacked the power plants of the United States. I wrote something actually in my book, quoting an article where somebody in Britain said that virtually every company was hacked by the Chinese. This is organized, government-sponsored hacking. They have the secrets of the world's economy, the world's defense, the world's power plants. And what does the United States do? It allows their students to be educated in our universities so that when they go home, they can destroy the United States. I mean, we're at war with them. People foolishly don't see it. They don't see it. And it's so dangerous. It's so pernicious. And it's so sad that people don't see it that way. Nobody's standing up and saying, look what they've done to us. What they've done is they've done much more than attacking than the Japanese did when they attacked Pearl Harbor. They took our military secrets. They took our business secrets. They have the keys to our power plants. They could turn the country off probably if they wanted to. And we're welcoming their students. We're educating them. We're giving them all the scientific skills they need to continue destroying our country. And everybody's happy.
That's for another day, Rabbi. But we definitely have big problems in the country, in the world. The economy's teetering, regardless what the headlines say. Want to thank you for coming on. Just give us a location of your website, how we find out more about you, how we get your book.
My website is RabbiGanz, GANZ.com.
All right. And, of course, you go to the show notes on the financialsurvivalnetwork.com. You can click right through to Rabbi's site. And don't forget, sign up for our newsletter. Got some great work coming out. Have you noticed that there are no new bills coming into circulation? Take a look at the money in your pocket. It's falling apart. Why is that the case? Supposedly they're printing new money. It's not coming into circulation. Article about that coming up this weekend. You need to take a look at it. Something is afoot in the Treasury and the Federal Reserve. You need to start thinking about that. Rabbi, we can't thank you enough. Love having you on the show. Talk to you again soon. Be well.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure being on the show, as usual.
What happens if the collapse never really comes? You need income, and Jason Hartman can help you get it. He's helped thousands of people realize their dreams of financial independence through real estate investing, and now he's got an unbeatable offer for you. He's offering my ebook, Forget Wall Street, Go for the Gold and Silver Too, for free. Just visit jasonhartman.com/Lutz. The first 100 Financial Survival Network listeners will get the book free. Remember, you can't afford to put all your eggs in one basket. Real estate should be part of a balanced investment portfolio along with gold and silver. Just go to jasonhartman.com/Lutz and sign up today. When it comes to real estate investing, Jason Hartman is the only person we trust on the Financial Survival Network. So make your money work as hard as you do by building an income property empire. Real estate is America's proven investment. Go to www.jasonhartman.com/Lutz and get your free ebook today. That's Jason, HARTMAN.com/Lutz. That's Jason, HARTMAN.com/Lutz. Jason knows how to help you retire with a portfolio of income-producing property. Go to jasonhartman.com/Lutz.
FSN Radio. It's all about what's next. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and sign up for your free weekly newsletter. You'll also get 3 free reports. The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.